such an honor for me to be here today. Exactly 2 weeks ago, I received the invitation to become a TED Talk speaker. And I spent my whole night in Australia thinking about how do I make these two words, the first, relate to myself. And turned out I don't have any stories for you, but I have this single perspective that I might want to share with you for today. A few months ago, I watched a movie about an individual. This person was the first in a family to break the poverty cycle. They were the first to break the chain of generational struggles, to step into the courtroom with faith in justice, and also the first in a family to graduate college, Yale Law. And they lived their mother out of the life that she'd been born into. And this struck me deeply. I don't name the person or the movie here today because this isn't about their story. It's about the quiet power of these first. We often talk about these loud and invisible first, but we forget to mention the quiet and invisible revolutions. The kind that doesn't make headlines, but ripple through families forever. And so this is a perspective about redefining the first and how do we make room for more. Now there are many voices around narrating how our life should be. And these voices are often so emphatic, absolute, and forceful that it may never occur to some that our voices, their voices, might be as strong as others, or even stronger. My mom, sitting right there, she was born and raised in Beirne, and she went through a divorce before she met my father. All the years that she had worked for had been to purchase for her children just one privilege: the abilities to see and experience more truths than those given to her by my grandparents. And as much as she loves and takes pride in her family, Mom and Dad, they never failed to provide us with the kind of experiences that would expand our understanding of what was possible in our lives. But when I think about this, I often thought all these people that come before me, they knew these two truths: how survival looks like at its worst, and how life feels like at its best. Yet they decided to make a step backward so I can have my step forward. So that was how Mom, I often tell, she was my first. She was the first to hand me this key. Now, as I take this key and I step a step forward, I grew up. I realized that I've never been particularly good at or interested in leading people. I don't have the natural charisma that motivates the crowds. What I do have is I love to read, to learn, to write. I write a lot on my social medias. If any of you follow me, thank you so much for that. But I also love to be inspired by other people. I also have this ability to recognize good leadership when I see it. Because when I'm under great leadership, that's when I do my best. And that's when I feel most empowered to contribute meaningfully. But I don't often think about this as something that I should be proud of. Because I'm the one who often follow other people, I don't lead. But there comes this circumstance. A few years ago, as a sophomore student, I applied to work as a legal assistant in Australia at this prominent firm specializing in medical negligence and personal injury. The barista work deeply resonated with me. They represent children affected by injury, mothers suffering from trauma, and holding hospitals and practitioners accountable for failure and mistreatment. And I deeply respect their work. But for that, I bet a lot of people do too. And that was the only thing that I had. My CV wasn't impressive. I only had a few academic achievements from high school, but nothing extraordinary. I didn't have those leadership titles or extracurriculars that everyone else, when they apply to this position at a renowned firm, they seem to have. But then I had this naive confidence. I always felt like this work called to me. And I guess when you're a lot younger, and you don't have a lot of things going around in your head, there's actually little room for self-doubt. So I applied. And to my genuine surprise, the firm's lead barista, he responded and he said he wanted to have a chat. So that came how I had my first time stepping through the chamber, a big and intimidating place right at the heart of the city centre. And when I met this barista, he cut straight to the point. He said, "I wanted to see you because I am curious about your personality." And then he came to explain that my resume, it stood out not because it was the strongest or I was the bestest, but because I was different. I didn't come from the same background as those who would apply for this position. My English at that time wasn't as polished as what the academic world typically demands. For him, it feels as though I've cheated my way into a job way bigger than my mind can handle. But then he also told me that I remind him of his wife's past when she was younger at my age. His wife is an immigrant Australian. And then he came to ask me, what might we gain by making space for your story here? Now, for a bit of context, I do believe that training up a legal assistant, and especially someone who hasn't had any knowledge in the field, it requires years of investment. And no firm would want to dedicate that time and effort into someone who might leave after a few years. So I understood why this was a central question between us, and I knew how to craft a perfect answer that would potentially guarantee me the job. I've learned that lesson before after multiple no's for the same reason over and over again. But at that time, I still chose to speak with honesty. So I told him, "Sir, I want to step in this field. I desperately want to step in this field because I want and I need the skills that the field trains us for. Simple as it is, I want to be articulate with words. I believe that the words are the language of the heart, reason, and integrity. And as now we're chronically online most of the time, people tend to forget how each word that we use can have such an impact on ourselves and on others, as a noise or as an instrument to cut through these noises. I have this hunger to learn how to listen and to not rely upon the convenience of casual opinions. And so I do think I might want to come back to my country sometime in the future." When I said that I was 18, I had no plan, no idea on how is this going to work. But I do believe, and always as a child, I always had this feeling inside my heart. I always thought I wanted to make the so-called luxury of access to justice well-aware, well-reached to everyone, starting from those who have stopped expecting it, and starting from where I come from. And that is exactly why words matter so much to me, and I'll tell you why. Now, after he listened to me, this barrister, he handed me 3 thick pieces of legislation. As a fresh year uni student, this is one of the emails that he sent me, and one of that I still remember was the Personal Injury Proceeding Act, the PIPA. So he sent me this email, tell me to read through these sections, come back in 4 days, and tell me what you think. I stepped out of the chamber and I felt this mix of panic and excitement. I didn't know how to read legal documents back then. I wasn't trained. And I still struggle a bit now, but I just take a bit less time to process. The words in these books were dense, the concepts unfamiliar. And for most, I didn't understand a single word what he meant by telling me, "Tell me what you think." On what? But then, above and beyond anything, I felt this feeling that I hadn't felt in such a long time. Recognition. Not for my achievements, not for my titles, but for what my heart carries and for my raw potential. For the first time in this foreign country, I felt like I belonged into a room I always wanted to enter. Someone looks at my messy and imperfect efforts and tell me, maybe show me what you've got. That moment has stayed with me for so long because it taught me something so crucial. When I've spent years feeling like no one, even in the simplest of moments, like when I was celebrating my graduation without my family and I was holding this camera, taking photos for the people of my age, being seen changes everything. And it's not about opportunities, it's about validation. The kind that make you sit up straighter, work harder, dream bigger, and achieve this grand and sweeping narrative that you deserve. And I guess that's also how I came to understand this manifesto of the first. The first is a chorus. Beautiful people, they don't just happen. They are the solid evidence of what becomes possible when the communities rally and we push each other up. My mom often said to me this idioms in Vietnam. Nhìn lên mình chẳng bằng ai, nhìn xuống chẳng ai bằng mình. You're no better than anyone else, and no one is better than you. And as much as I love this part of her, I often see it also as an interesting way to attribute our success to the communities. Our hardships are shared, and our privilege an unearned blessing. For many years, my mom was a nurse, and then she became a stay-at-home mom, and she dedicated her whole life to be the architect of our education. Mom believes her voice isn't as strong as others. I tell her it's the strongest that I've heard, because it carries the voice of all those who were silent before her. And when the world taught women to lean in, to be independent, to give no damn and need no man, Mom taught me to just be myself, embrace this beauty of this nurturing and resilient womanhood. As a primary school kid in Vietnam, we're often told about this image of the unnoticed Vietnamese bamboo, bending and unbreakable. Mom taught me to not just look at the bamboo that reaches the sunlight, but also all the roots that have made it possible. So when I think about the first, I try to think smaller, and I imagine this generational power, young children, especially in the marginalized communities, they all have this beautiful desire to be seen. But when parents are struggling to put food on the table, there's actually little rooms for emotional vocabs. And that is exactly why the words of recognition and affirmation has to be spoken by schools, laws, and leaders. Our voice must be so loud that drown out the system inherent blindness to the invisible workforce that have held our communities together and keep everyone moving forward. I do believe that even one simple moment of recognition from one adult can buffer a child's adversity and reroute that whole child's trajectory. We all have choices as wide as our mind. We're often told that survival needs come first. Food, shelter, safety, and then come things like cultural self-fulfillment and self-awareness. But history has proven that there are many more individuals who refuse to be reduced to bare needs. And as part of these communities, we have those individuals, someone somewhere, they're trapped under the basement, and they fight every day for the policies that require more of them than others, and attempt to give them less in return. We don't all have the same narratives, we don't have the same life stories, we don't have the same frame of reference. So if we judge everyone with the same yardstick, with the highest frame of reference, it's the same as imprisoning the people from the disadvantaged communities into a lower version of themselves, in a reduced and distorted mode of being. Because if we forget to honor these silent movements, if we only crown the climbers and we erase the ladders, it's the same as telling the next generation, those that work in the invisible workforce, that your labor doesn't count. And if this structural invisibility remains unaddressed, I do believe there will be underutilization of whichever policies or programs implemented. Sometimes the most difficult battles are fought with the simplest of action, and that action is recognition of the voices that don't scream so loud. My idea of justice begins when we recognize the invisible workforce as part of the collective we. And just now, I was so honored to be listening to Miss Gilan, a very beautiful and inspiring speech. And she talked about how we're nothing but to be built by other people. We don't work on our own. And it stayed with me for so long. Thank you so much, Bella. So when I talked about the first, I asked myself, how do I use the words that I know and I was trained for to exert people their rights and worth and to create bridge for human potential? My name is Alissa, and I'm not here today because my story is extraordinary, but because I stand on the shoulders of the unseen first. Ever since I became a content creator, my voice had reached more than I can ever imagine it would. But my voice, it is strong because of theirs. Thank you.